Maria had always believed that kindness would be enough to earn her a place in the world. She never imagined that the very church where she'd found solace for 15 years would become the stage for her greatest humiliation and her most powerful awakening. What happened next would shake the foundations of everything that small-town congregation thought they knew about faith, power, and the quiet woman they'd so carelessly cast aside. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows of St. Matthew's Episcopal Church as Maria Elena Rodriguez adjusted her modest navy dress one final time. She had chosen it carefully, conservative enough to satisfy the church's unspoken dress code, yet flattering enough to make her feel confident on what should have been one of the happiest days of her life. Today, her younger sister Carmen was marrying Thomas Blackwood, heir to one of the town's most prominent families, and Maria had been asked to do a reading from Corinthians during the ceremony. She clutched her worn leather Bible, its pages soft from years of faithful use, and whispered a small prayer of gratitude. After months of planning, everything seemed perfect. The church was decorated with white roses and baby's breath, exactly as Carmen had envisioned. The guest list included everyone who mattered in their small Illinois town of Millbrook: business owners, community leaders, and the kind of old money families that had shaped the area for generations. Maria arrived early, as was her custom. She had always been the responsible one, the sister who made sure everything ran smoothly behind the scenes. While Carmen basked in attention and praise, Maria was content to be the steady support system, the one who remembered details and anticipated needs. It was a role she'd embraced since childhood, when their parents died in a car accident and she became Carmen's guardian at just 19 years old. The church secretary, Mrs. Patterson, greeted her with a polite but distant smile. "Oh, Maria, you're here early." There was something odd in her tone, a hesitation that made Maria pause. "Is Carmen here yet?" I wanted to make sure she had everything she needed before the ceremony. Mrs. Patterson's eyes darted away uncomfortably. "Actually, dear, there's been a small change in plans. Mrs. Blackwood would like to speak with you in the vestry." The mention of Thomas's mother sent a small chill through Maria. Victoria Blackwood was a woman who commanded respect through fear rather than admiration, and Maria had always felt scrutinized in her presence. The vestry was a small room behind the altar where the pastor prepared for services. Victoria Blackwood stood there in an elegant cream-colored suit, her silver hair perfectly styled, her expression cold as winter steel. Beside her stood Carmen, Maria's own sister, looking uncomfortable but resolute. The sight of them together, clearly united in some decision that excluded her, made Maria's stomach drop. "Maria," Victoria began without preamble, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding about today's ceremony. We've had to make some last-minute adjustments to the program." Maria looked between Victoria and Carmen, confusion evident on her face. "What kind of adjustments? Is everything all right?" She reached out to touch Carmen's arm, but her sister stepped back slightly, avoiding eye contact. Victoria's lips pursed into a thin line. "The truth is, Maria, your presence today would be inappropriate. We've learned some things about your recent activities that make it impossible for you to participate in this sacred ceremony." The words hit Maria like a physical blow. "My activities? I don't understand. What are you talking about?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended, the confusion and hurt evident in every syllable. Carmen finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maria, they know about the community center, about the people you've been helping." The way she said "people" carried a weight of judgment that made Maria's heart race with a terrible understanding. For the past 6 months, Maria had been volunteering at a community outreach center in the next town over. It was nothing controversial, just helping provide meals, job training, and basic services to anyone who needed them. The center served everyone without judgment: single mothers, elderly residents struggling with fixed incomes, immigrants working to build new lives, and yes, people who had made mistakes and were trying to rebuild. "I don't see how helping people could be inappropriate for a church wedding," Maria said, finding her voice again. The irony wasn't lost on her, being criticized for Christian charity in the house of Christ himself. Victoria's expression hardened further. Don't be naive, Maria. You've been associating with criminals, drug addicts, and illegal immigrants. Do you have any idea how that reflects on this family, on this church? The Blackwood name has stood for respectability in this community for 4 generations. The accusation stung not just because of its cruelty, but because of its fundamental misunderstanding of what Maria had been doing. She had been living her faith, not just talking about it on Sunday mornings. She had been feeding the hungry, clothing the poor, and showing compassion to those society had forgotten. Exactly what every sermon preached, but few actually practiced. Those people have names, Mrs. Blackwood. They have families and dreams and struggles just like anyone else. They're not defined by their worst moments or their circumstances. Maria's voice grew stronger as she spoke, fueled by righteous anger on behalf of the individuals she'd grown to care about. Carmen shifted uncomfortably, finally meeting her sister's eyes. Maria, please. You have to understand our position. Thomas's family has reputation to maintain. His father is running for city council, and Victoria is up for president of the country club. They can't afford any associations that might be seen as controversial. The betrayal cut deeper than any stranger's judgment could have. This was her sister, the person she had sacrificed her own dreams to raise and support. Carmen had been her world for so many years, and now she was choosing social status over family loyalty. So what exactly are you saying? Maria asked, though she already knew the answer would shatter something inside her. Victoria stepped forward, her presence dominating the small room. You cannot participate in this ceremony. In fact, we think it would be best if you didn't attend at all. Your presence would be a distraction, and frankly, an embarrassment. The silence that followed was deafening. Maria could hear the distant sounds of wedding guests arriving, the soft murmur of conversation and laughter that should have included her. She had helped plan this day, had chosen her reading weeks ago, had even helped Carmen pick out her shoes. Now she was being cast out like a leper. Carmen, Maria said softly, making one last appeal to the sister she had loved unconditionally for 23 years. This is really what you want? You want me to leave on your wedding day because I've been helping people who need it? Carmen's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. I want you to understand that sometimes we have to make difficult choices. Thomas and I are starting a life together, and that life requires certain considerations. The corporate language, so unlike Carmen's usual warm demeanor, told Maria everything she needed to know. Her sister had already chosen her new family over her old one, had already decided that social climbing was more important than the woman who had raised her. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Maria straightened her shoulders, drawing on a strength she didn't know she possessed. I see. Well, then I suppose there's nothing left to say. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Carmen, I hope you find everything you're looking for in this new life of yours. But remember, the people who love you unconditionally are rare in this world. Think carefully before you throw that away for people who love you only conditionally. With that, Maria walked out of the vestry, through the church she had attended faithfully for 15 years, past the guests who had known her since childhood but now looked away uncomfortably. She could feel their eyes on her back, could sense the whispered conversations beginning already. By evening, everyone in Millbrook would know that Maria Rodriguez had been asked to leave her own sister's wedding. The late October air was crisp against her face as she stepped outside, and for a moment she simply stood on the church steps, trying to process what had just happened. The life she had built in this small town, her relationships, her reputation, her sense of belonging, had just been stripped away in a matter of minutes. But as she walked to her car, something unexpected began to happen. Instead of the crushing despair she might have expected, Maria felt something else entirely, a profound sense of freedom. For 15 years, she had tried to fit into boxes that were never quite the right size, had moderated her opinions, and minimized her dreams to make others comfortable. She drove home slowly, taking the long way through downtown Millbrook, looking at her hometown with fresh eyes. The pristine Victorian houses with their perfect lawns suddenly seemed less charming and more suffocating. The small-town values she had once admired now felt more like small-town prejudices. At home, Maria changed out of her wedding attire and into comfortable jeans and a sweater. She looked at herself in the mirror and realized something startling. She looked more like herself than she had in years. The person staring back at her wasn't trying to be smaller or quieter or more acceptable. She was just Maria, and for the first time in a long time that felt like enough. She spent the afternoon in her garden, pulling weeds and thinking about the crossroads she now faced. She could stay in Millbrook, rebuild her reputation slowly, and pretend this had never happened. Or she could take this as the universe's way of telling her it was time for a change. As the sun began to set, Maria's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Ms. Rodriguez, this is David Chen from the community center. I heard what happened today, and I want you to know that every person you've helped thinks you're a hero. Don't let small minds convince you otherwise. Also, I have a proposition for you. Call me when you're ready." David was the center's director, a former social worker who had dedicated his life to serving underserved communities. Maria had worked closely with him over the past months and had come to respect his wisdom and compassion. Whatever his proposition was, she found herself curious rather than cautious. She made herself a simple dinner and thought about the people she had met at the community center. There was Elena, a young mother who had fled domestic violence and was working 2 jobs while learning English. There was Marcus, a veteran struggling with PTSD who was slowly rebuilding his life one day at a time. There was Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman whose fixed income barely covered her medication, let alone food. These were the people Victoria Blackwood had dismissed as unworthy of association. These were the people Carmen had been embarrassed to have connected to her family, but these were also the people who had taught Maria more about courage, resilience, and genuine faith than any Sunday sermon ever had. By the time full darkness fell, Maria had made her decision. She called David Chen. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you," he said warmly. "How are you holding up?" "Better than expected, actually." "What's this proposition you mentioned?" David's excitement was audible through the phone. "Maria, I've been watching your work here, and you have a gift for connecting with people. You see their potential, not their problems. I've been offered a position to start a new regional outreach program, something that would serve 3 counties instead of just 1. I need someone to help me build it from the ground up, someone with your heart and your skills." The offer was tempting, but Maria had practical concerns. "David, that sounds wonderful, but I have a mortgage here, and frankly, after today, I'm not sure my reputation could handle another controversy." "That's the beautiful part," David continued. "The position comes with a housing allowance, and it's based in Chicago. Fresh start, new city, chance to do work that really matters on a scale you've never imagined. Plus, I happen to know someone there who's very interested in funding programs exactly like this. Chicago." Maria had dreamed of living in a real city when she was younger, before responsibilities had anchored her to Millbrook. The idea of starting over, of building something meaningful, sent a thrill of possibility through her chest. "Who's the potential funder?" she asked, though she was already mentally packing her apartment. "Someone who believes in second chances and the power of community service. Someone who started with nothing and built an empire, but never forgot where he came from. His name is Alessandro Rossi, and he specifically requested to meet with you." Alessandro Rossi. Even in small-town Millbrook, people knew that name. Tech entrepreneur, philanthropist, one of the youngest billionaires in the country. The idea that someone of his stature would want to meet with a small-town volunteer seemed surreal. Why would someone like that want to meet me? David's voice carried a smile. "Because, Maria, you're exactly the kind of person who can change the world. You just need the right stage. Are you interested in hearing more?" Maria looked around her small apartment, at the life she had built that had just rejected her so completely. Then she thought about Elena and Marcus and Mrs. Chen, about all the people who needed advocates and champions. She thought about the woman she had been that morning, trying so hard to fit in, and the woman she was now, finally ready to stand out. "Yes," she said firmly. "I'm very interested." As she hung up the phone, Maria felt something she hadn't experienced in years: genuine excitement about the future. Tomorrow she would start making calls, arranging meetings, planning her escape from a life that had grown too small for her expanding heart. She had no idea that across town, her sister's wedding reception was already winding down, that Carmen was beginning to realize the price of her choice, or that by morning, the story of Maria Rodriguez would take a turn that no one in Millbrook could have predicted. All she knew was that for the first time in her life, she was choosing herself, not out of selfishness, but out of a profound understanding that she had something valuable to offer the world. The church that had rejected her had unknowingly set her free, and she intended to make the most of that freedom. The phone call to Alessandro Rossi was scheduled for Monday morning. By then, Maria Rodriguez would be ready to step into a life she had never dared to imagine, armed with nothing but her principles and everything to prove. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp clarity that signals life-changing moments. Maria sat in her small kitchen, hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee, staring at her phone. In 15 minutes, she would speak with Alessandro Rossi, a conversation that could reshape everything. She had spent the weekend researching his background, discovering a man who had built a technology empire from nothing, who funded education programs for underserved communities, and who had a reputation for seeing potential where others saw only problems. The weekend had also brought unexpected revelations about her own life. After word spread about her ejection from the wedding, Maria discovered who her real friends were. Some people she had considered close allies suddenly became unavailable, their calls unreturned, and their social media interactions conspicuously absent. But others surprised her with their support. Mrs. Henderson from the library called to tell her she had always admired Maria's work with disadvantaged communities. Tom Martinez from the hardware store stopped by with a basket of homemade tamales from his wife, saying they respected anyone who stood up for the forgotten. Most surprising of all was the call from Pastor Williams from the Methodist Church across town. "Maria," he had said, "what happened at St. Matthew's was a disgrace to everything Christ taught. You were living the gospel while they were merely reciting it. If you ever need a spiritual home, our doors are open." These gestures of support had strengthened her resolve. She was not the problem. She had simply outgrown a world that was too small for her expanding vision of what service meant. When her phone rang at exactly 9 o'clock, Maria answered with confidence she didn't know she possessed. "Ms. Rodriguez? This is Alessandro Rossi. David Chen has told me remarkable things about your work." His voice carried a slight accent that spoke of international experience, and there was a warmth that immediately put her at ease. "Mr. Rossi, thank you for taking the time to speak with me. I have to admit, I'm curious why someone of your stature would be interested in a small-town volunteer." Maria had learned that directness often served her better than false modesty. Alessandro's laugh was genuine. "Ms. Rodriguez, may I call you Maria? The truth is, I've been looking for someone exactly like you for months. Let me explain something about my business philosophy. I invest in people first, projects second. David sent me videos of your work at the community center, and I saw something that can't be taught or bought: authentic compassion combined with practical intelligence." Maria felt a flutter of excitement mixed with apprehension. What exactly would this position involve? "I want to create a network of community service centers across the Midwest, places that don't just hand out resources but actually transform lives. I need someone to design and implement programs that address root causes, not just symptoms. Someone who understands that dignity matters as much as aid." Alessandro's enthusiasm was infectious. "David tells me you have ideas about job training programs, educational partnerships, and community leadership development." The conversation that followed revealed a convergence of vision that seemed almost too perfect to be real. Alessandro described his own journey from a scholarship student at Northwestern to tech entrepreneur, emphasizing how mentorship and community support had been crucial to his success. Maria shared her experiences working with people society had written off, explaining how she had seen remarkable transformations when individuals were given genuine opportunities rather than just charity. "Maria, I'm going to be direct with you. I'm offering you a position as Regional Director of Community Impact for the Rossi Foundation. The salary is $150,000 annually, plus benefits and a housing allowance. The position is based in Chicago, but you'll travel throughout Illinois, Wisconsin, and Indiana, establishing and overseeing programs. Are you interested? The figure took Maria's breath away. It was more than triple what she had made in her previous job. More money than she had ever imagined earning, but beyond the financial security. It represented validation of her worth, recognition that her skills and passion had value in the wider world. Mr. Rossi, I'm very interested. When would you want me to start? How does next Monday sound? I know it's fast, but I have a project that needs immediate attention, and I believe you're the person to handle it. There's a community center in East Garfield Park that's struggling to maintain its programs due to funding cuts. I want you to assess the situation and develop a plan to not just save it, but make it a model for urban community development. After the call ended, Maria sat in stunned silence for several minutes. In less than a week, she had gone from being humiliated and cast out to being offered a position that would allow her to impact thousands of lives. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of justice after all. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Maria gave notice at her part-time job, arranged to rent out her house furnished, and began the emotional process of saying goodbye to the life she had known. Some farewells were easier than others. Leaving the community center where she had discovered her calling was particularly difficult. The people she had worked with threw her a surprise party, presenting her with a scrapbook filled with letters from individuals whose lives she had touched. Elena, the young mother, wrote, "Maria, you were the first person to see me as more than my circumstances. Because of your encouragement, I enrolled in nursing school. I graduate next spring, and it's because you believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Marcus, the veteran, had contributed a simple but powerful message. "You saved my life, not with grand gestures, but by treating me like I mattered. That's a gift I can never repay, but I promise to pass it forward." These testimonials reminded Maria why she had endured years of criticism and social ostracism for her volunteer work. Every awkward conversation at church functions, every snide comment about her bleeding heart liberalism, every sacrifice of social standing had been worth it for moments like these. The hardest goodbye was with Mrs. Chen, the elderly woman whose fixed income struggles had originally motivated Maria to start volunteering. "You have given me hope, dear one," she said, pressing a small jade bracelet into Maria's hands. "This belonged to my mother. She taught me that kindness is never wasted, even when the world doesn't appreciate it. Wear this and remember that you carry the prayers of many people with you." By Thursday, Maria was ready to leave Millbrook behind. But first, she had one final task to complete. She drove to St. Matthew's Church, not for reconciliation or confrontation, but for closure. She wanted to walk through the sanctuary one more time, to remember both the comfort and the limitations it had represented in her life. The church was empty except for Mrs. Patterson, who looked up in surprise as Maria entered. "Oh, Maria, I heard you were leaving town. I hope there are no hard feelings about the wedding situation." Maria studied the older woman's face, seeing genuine discomfort beneath the polite words. Mrs. Patterson had always been kind to her, even if she had been part of the system that ultimately rejected her. "No hard feelings, Mrs. Patterson. I actually came to say thank you." At the secretary's confused expression, Maria continued, "Sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is to stop accepting a smaller version of yourself. What happened here last weekend freed me to become who I was meant to be." Mrs. Patterson's eyes widened with understanding. "Maria, I want you to know that not everyone agreed with Mrs. Blackwood's decision. Several members of the congregation have expressed their displeasure privately. I appreciate that, but it doesn't matter now. I've realized that trying to fit into spaces where you have to minimize yourself is exhausting. I'd rather stand alone in my truth than sit comfortably in someone else's judgment." As Maria walked through the sanctuary one final time, she felt peace rather than bitterness. This building had been important in shaping her faith, even if the institution had ultimately failed to live up to its own teachings. She said a silent prayer of gratitude for the good memories and forgiveness for the painful ones, then stepped outside into the afternoon sunshine. Friday morning, Maria loaded her car with essentials and began the drive to Chicago. As the familiar landmarks of Millbrook disappeared in her rearview mirror, she felt a profound sense of anticipation. She was driving toward uncertainty, but also toward possibility, toward a chance to make the kind of difference she had always dreamed of making. Her first weekend in Chicago was spent in a corporate apartment Alessandro had arranged, exploring the city and preparing for Monday's meeting. She visited the struggling community center in East Garfield Park, walking through the neighborhood and observing the challenges and opportunities. The area bore the scars of disinvestment and neglect, but Maria could see the underlying strength of the community, the determination in people's faces, the way neighbors looked out for each other despite having little themselves. Monday morning arrived with unseasonable warmth, as if the city itself was welcoming her. Maria dressed carefully in a professional blazer she had bought over the weekend, carrying herself with newfound confidence as she entered the gleaming downtown office building that housed Rossi Enterprises. Alessandro Rossi was not what she had expected. Despite his reputation and wealth, he greeted her personally in the lobby, dressed casually in khakis and a button-down shirt, his manner more reminiscent of a favorite professor than a corporate executive. "Maria, welcome to Chicago. Are you ready to change some lives?" His office reflected his priorities. Walls covered with photos from community programs he funded rather than business awards. Bookshelves lined with works on social justice and urban development rather than management texts. During their meeting, he outlined his vision with the passion of someone who had never forgotten his own struggles. "I want to create something revolutionary," he explained, spreading architectural drawings across his desk. "Not charity centers, but empowerment centers. Places where people can access job training, childcare, educational support, healthcare services, and small business loans, all under one roof. I want to prove that investing in people's potential is not just morally right, but economically smart." The scope of his vision was breathtaking. He talked about partnering with local universities to bring educational opportunities directly to underserved communities, working with businesses to create apprenticeship programs, developing affordable housing projects that strengthened rather than displaced existing neighborhoods. "Maria, I need someone who can see the forest and the trees, who can design big-picture strategies but also connect with individuals. From everything David has told me, you're that person." The first project he assigned her was ambitious: completely revitalize the East Garfield Park Center within 6 months, then use it as a prototype for expansion throughout the region. The budget was more generous than anything Maria had ever worked with, but the expectations were correspondingly high. Over the following weeks, Maria threw herself into the work with an energy and focus that surprised even her. She spent her days in East Garfield Park, meeting with community leaders, surveying residents about their needs, and building relationships with local organizations. She discovered a neighborhood rich in history and culture, full of people who had been overlooked by traditional social services, but who had innovative ideas about community solutions. Working with local architect Sarah Washington, Maria redesigned the center's space to be more welcoming and functional. They created a children's area where parents could safely leave kids during job training sessions, a computer lab equipped with the latest technology, and flexible meeting spaces that could accommodate everything from support groups to business seminars. But the physical renovation was only part of the transformation. Maria recruited and trained a diverse staff that reflected the community itself, individuals who understood the challenges residents faced because they had lived through similar experiences. She established partnerships with community college for GED and certification programs, with local healthcare providers for on-site medical services, and with small business development organizations for entrepreneurship training. The most innovative program was Maria's brainchild, a social enterprise initiative where community members could start businesses that addressed local needs while generating income. The center provided seed funding, mentorship, and shared commercial kitchen space for food entrepreneurs, equipment and workspace for craftspeople and service providers, and marketing support to help new businesses reach customers beyond the neighborhood. 6 months after Maria began her work, the East Garfield Park Center was unrecognizable. What had been a struggling facility serving maybe 50 people weekly was now a bustling hub, serving over 300 families monthly. The waiting list for programs was months long, and requests for similar centers were pouring in from communities throughout the region. The success attracted media attention, bringing reporters and visitors from across the country to see what was being called the Chicago model of community development. Maria found herself being interviewed on local television, speaking at conferences, and consulting with other cities interested in replicating their approach. But the true measure of success was in the individual stories. Elena, the young mother she had worked with in Millbrook, had moved to Chicago and was now completing her nursing degree while working part-time at the center's health clinic. Marcus had started a landscaping business that employed other veterans and was already considering expansion. Mrs. Chen had moved to be near her daughter and was teaching traditional cooking classes at the center, passing on both skills and cultural knowledge to younger generations. The transformation wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. Maria had discovered talents she didn't know she possessed, had learned to navigate corporate boardrooms with the same ease she brought to community meetings, had developed a national reputation as an expert on urban community development. More importantly, she had found her calling. This wasn't just a job or even a career, it was the work she had been meant to do all along. Every challenge energized rather than exhausted her. Every success felt like a step towards something larger and more meaningful. Alessandro had become not just her employer but her mentor and friend, someone who shared her vision of what communities could become when given proper resources and respect. Their professional relationship had deepened into genuine partnership, built on mutual admiration for each other's dedication and complementary skills. 1 year after leaving Millbrook in disgrace, Maria Rodriguez had become one of the most sought-after experts on community development in the Midwest. She had testified before congressional committees, advised mayoral campaigns, and been featured in national magazines as an example of innovative social entrepreneurship. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came when she received a call from David Chen, who had relocated to Milwaukee to expand their network. "Maria," he said, "I just got off the phone with a reporter from the Millbrook Tribune. They want to do a feature story on your success, call it, 'Local Woman Makes National Impact.' They're particularly interested in how your work began at that little community center here in Illinois." Maria smiled, thinking of how different her life might have been if St. Matthew's Church had embraced rather than rejected her service work. "Tell them I'd be happy to talk, David. I think it's important for people to understand that sometimes what looks like an ending is actually a beginning." As she hung up the phone, Maria looked out the window of her downtown Chicago office at the city that had become her home, at the communities she had helped transform, at the future she was still building one relationship at a time. The girl who had been cast out of her sister's wedding for helping the wrong kind of people had become a woman who was changing the world by refusing to accept that any person was the wrong kind. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.